This video is going to teach you about layers in Photoshop. If you want to follow along, you can find the source files used in this tutorial in the details area of the video workshop. So it turns out that layers are an essential building block of any complex Photoshop document. They're what allow you to do compositing of multiple images, and they keep things as flexible as possible when you're editing. The very first layer that you have to kind of understand is something called a background layer. Now, every image you open is most likely going to have a background layer, and it's a little bit unique from any of the other layers in that it cannot be deleted, moved, or support transparency, which means if I wanted to see through this gigantic leaf to an image underneath it, I would have to convert this background layer to a layer that does support transparency. Now, the easiest way to do that is just to simply double-click on the word background in the Layers palette and give your layers a descriptive name. So I'm going to just go ahead and call this leaf and click return. Now this is a layer that can actually support transparency. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, if I get my eraser tool and actually just start erasing with my brush here, you'll see that checkerboard pattern behind there. I'm not painting with a checkerboard. I'm actually deleting through this leaf to transparent pixels. If there was another layer behind this leaf layer, I would see it through that hole that I just painted. I'm going to go ahead and undo that paint stroke. I'm going to click into another document, and with my Move tool, I can move images from one file to another, from one window to another, simply by clicking and dragging the document into the other window. When my cursor is over the other window, I can simply let go. If I hold down the Shift key and let go of the mouse first, I will center the document I'm dragging into the document I dragged it into. I can go ahead and close this other document now because you can see it's now a layer inside my Layers palette. It's on top of the leaf layer. I might want to change the name of that to Bird of Paradise. And now I have two separate layers. These layers can be turned on and off by clicking on the eye next to the layer thumbnail. And now that I have two layers and neither one of them is a background layer, I can actually change the stacking order as well. So if I click on Bird of Paradise and drag it below Leaf, I've basically changed my composite. This lesson here just teaches you that you can't always trust what you see on your screen. You definitely need to take a look at the Layers palette. The Layers palette is kind of like the navigation of your document. By looking at this, you can actually see there is another layer underneath the leaf layer. It's just being obstructed by this layer above, which brings up this concept of opacity, being able to see through one layer to another. In the Layers palette, you'll see there's an opacity field, and I can click and drag on that number and lower the opacity, but I can also do it with my keyboard. It's usually a much more flexible way to do it. As long as I have my Move tool selected, which I do here. If you don't, you just press the V key on your keyboard. I can type a number to change the opacity of a layer. So if I type 5, I now have a layer, this leaf layer, at 50% opacity. If I type in 8, it's 80%, and 0 will get me back to 100. So that's a very quick interactive way to change the opacity of layers. If I want to drag Bird of Paradise above leaf again, I click and drag and move it above leaf, and I've got it there again. Again, if I want to lower the opacity of the Bird of Paradise, I can just press 5, and now it's 50% opaque or transparent, and I can see through to the leaf. Take it to 0. If I want to move the layer, I simply click and drag in the image. The layer that I currently have selected is the layer that will move. Let's go ahead and get another layer in here. I'm going to click into another document, and I'll grab this hibiscus flower and drag it into the other document. If I hold down the Shift key, it will center it. And when I let go, you'll see that it copied it from one document to another. Now I can move the hibiscus around separately from the Bird of Paradise. And if I want to transform the Bird of Paradise to make it smaller, I can hold down Command-T or Control-T on Windows, and I can go ahead and scale that. When I like the size, I press Return, and now I can move these around independent of each other. If I want, I can select more than one layer at a time now. I can do that a number of ways. I can hold down the Shift key and simply click on the other layer because I have an Auto Select feature turned on for the Move tool in my options bar up here. It says Auto Select, and that's checked. The other way, of course, is to hold down the Command or Shift key and just Command or Control click on Windows the layers that you want to add or subtract from your selection. If I just have these two layers selected, when I move them, they will move as a unit. If I am done treating these two layers independently, and as long as the pixels aren't overlapping in any way, they both have areas of transparency around them, I can go ahead and merge these two layers down without actually losing anything. If, of course, the pixels were overlapping, when they merge, they would become one layer, and I would lose the ability to treat each one of those separately. The Merge command can be found under the flyout menu of the Layers palette, and you can choose the Merge Layers command or Command or Control E. This now becomes one layer. It picks up only one of the names. Doesn't merge the name, but you can always go back and rename that by double-clicking and typing a new name in. And now they move as a single unit. A layer can also have something called a layer mask, which will hide or reveal certain parts of the layer depending on where you put the mask. I'm going to go ahead and press the letter F. and that will put us in what's called the maximized view, so I can actually see the canvas around my image here. I'm going to go to the leaf layer, and I want to add a layer mask to kind of fade this leaf back into the background. If I go to the bottom of the Layers palette and click the Add Layer Mask button, I get a second thumbnail to the right of my image thumbnail. I'm going to type G for the gradient tool, and I'm going to press from the left-hand side of the image almost all the way over to the right side of the image. And what you're seeing here now in this thumbnail, you see a black to white gradient. Basically, black hides and white reveals. Everywhere you see black on the layer thumbnail, the layer mask thumbnail, I'm hiding the leaf on that layer. Everywhere it's white, I see the leaf, and then gray, of course, is different degrees of transparency. I'm going to add a new layer below the leaf layer and fill it with white so I don't see the checkerboard anymore. By default, if I click the new layer icon, that new layer gets added above the existing layer. I'm going to undo it. Little shortcut for you. If you hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows and click the new layer icon, that new layer gets added below the current layer. So it just saves you the step of having to move it down below. I'm going to fill this layer with white. Because white is my current background color, I can hold down Command Delete or Command Backspace or Control Backspace on Windows to fill this layer with white. I might want to rename this. Instead of layer 1, we'll call it white, so we know what we're talking about here. Now, as I do my gradient on the leaf layer through the layer mask, I'm hiding the leaf and revealing the white underneath it. So hopefully that's a good introduction to the concept of layers and how you can use them to combine multiple images into a single document and also maintain as much flexibility and editability as possible.